I am Dr. Simranjeet Kaur, Professor at the School of Law, City University, Ludhiana, Punjab. It's pleasure to welcome you all to this session on the concept of distributive justice. Today, we will explore this fundamental principle of justice which plays a crucial role in shaping the distribution of the resources, opportunities and the burdens in the society. Understanding distributive justice is essential not only for the legal scholars, but also for the policy makers, social activists and the citizens who are keen to build a just and equitable society. By the end of this session, you will be able to learn and understand the meaning and the significance of the distributive justice. Analyze the key principles that guide the fair allocation of the resources and responsibilities in the society. Explore the theoretical contribution of John Rawls and his concept of justice and fairness. Examine criticism and the alternative perspective on distributive justice. Discuss the practical implications of the distributive justice in the Indian legal system, including reservation policies and economic redistribution measures. After this lecture, you will gain a clear understanding of the core principles of the distributive justice, be able to critically analyze Rawls' difference principles and its implication for the social inequality. Evaluate the challenge and criticism of various distributive justice models. Appreciate the legal and policy mechanism that aims to ensure fairness in different society with a focus on India. So, let us start exploring this interesting topic. Distributive justice is all about the distribution and allocation of the common goods and the common burdens. This benefits and the liabilities cover all the dimensions of the social life. It includes income, political power, education, taxes, work obligations, shelter, healthcare, military services, community assignments and the religious activities. Thus, many times the concept of justice is invoked regarding the minimum wages, legislation, affirmative actions, policies, public education, military conspirations, litigation as well as with the redistributive policies such as welfare, medical care, aid to developing the world, progressive income taxes and inheritance taxes. The resources of the community cannot be said to belong to any individual, but are to be distributed according to the judgment of what is the best interest of the people. The political institutions of the state are only fit to take such critical decisions. The principles of equity, equality and social need are most relevant in the context of the distributive justice. Objectives of the distributive justice. The prime objective of the distributive justice is not equality, but the common good. For example, prospering of all the members of the community. The goal of the flourishing the society will not be achieved by treating everyone identically, but by allocating them with appropriate roles. Opportunities and the resources. Distributive justice has been applied to the society when all the members are ensured for basic level of the goods, an equal opportunity to acquire more goods and receive the same amount of the goods for the same amount of the work. The major tenets of the distributive justice are equality, proportionality and fairness. John Rawls and the distributive justice. John Rawls' major work, A Theory of Justice in 1971, attracted the modern interest in the concept of justice. Rawls present a hypothetical original position in which people are behind a veil of ignorance of their places, statues in the society. Under these conditions, Rawls claims that people would unanimously choose a particular conception of justice. The greatest attention has been paid to his so-called difference principles according to which all goods are distributed equally unless an unequal distribution is to be advantage of the least favored. John Rawls from year 1921 to 2002 is widely regarded as one of the most influential political philosophers of the 20th century. His theory of distributive justice, presented most famously in his 1971 book, A Theory of Justice, redefined the way philosophers and the policy makers think about the justice, fairness and equality in the society. Rawls' work is a key contribution to the liberal political theory, and his ideas have had a profound impact on the debates surrounding social justice, particularly in the context of the economic distribution. Concept of the John Rawls theory of distributive justice. Rawls' theory is based on the vision of justice as a fairness, which is founded on the two core principles that believes he should be given the basic structure of the society. The original position and the veil of ignorance. Rawls introduced the original position as a hypothetical scenario in which individuals come together to form a social contract. The veil of ignorance is thought experiment designed to help the people decide what principles of justice they would agree to, assuming they do not know any of their personal characteristics such as their age, sex, race, talents or social status. The idea is that by stripping away personal biases and the self-interest, individual will be more likely to choose fair and impartial principles that promote justice for everyone, since they do not know whether they themselves will end up in the privileged or disadvantaged position in the society. The true principles of the justice from the original position, Rawls argues that the rational individuals would agree on two key principles of justice. The first principle, equal liberty principle. Each person should have equal basis liberties such as freedom of speech, conscience and the personal security that are compatible with the same liberties for the other. This principle takes the priority over the second principle and ensure that the individual freedom and the rights are protected. The second principle, difference principle and fair equality of opportunity. Fair equality of opportunity, all individuals should have the equal opportunity to access the social and economic goods like education, employment and the political positions, regardless of their background. The difference principle, social and economic inequalities are only justified if they benefit the least advantaged member of the society. In other words, disparities in the wealth or the social position are permissible only if they improve the well-being of the poorest or most disadvantaged member of the society. The second principle allows for the inequalities, but it restricts them by requiring that any disparities in the wealth or the social position must work to the benefit of those who are worst off. This is a key feature of Rawls' theory, as it sets limits on inequality while acknowledging that some degree of inequality can be beneficial for all if it improves the situation of the worst off. Rawls' difference principle in detail. The difference principle is the cornerstone of the Rawls theory of distributive justice. Rawls contends that inequalities in the society, whether in wealth, income or social status, are morally acceptable only if they result in compensating benefits for everyone, especially those who are least advantaged. This idea challenges the traditional view of the justice, which often treats equality as a straightforward goal. Practical example, consider a progressive tax system in which higher earners says a higher percentage of their income in the taxes. Rawls would argue that such a system is justified if it benefits the poorest member of the society by providing them with a better access to the public goods like education, health and the social services. Justification. Rawls justifies the differences principles by suggesting that if the people were behind the veil of the ignorance, they would choose a system that allows for some inequalities, as long as those inequality results in a better situation for the least well-off members of the society. This ensures that even those who ends up in the least advantageous position will not be left worse off by the social arrangements. The justice as the fairness framework. Rawls' theory of the distributive justice is often called justice as fairness because it attempts to create a fair system that balances the distribution of the benefits and burdens in the society. Fairness. Rawls emphasizes that justice is not simply about maximizing the overall welfare, which could allow the significant inequalities, or about strictly equal distribution, which could stilt incentive or the progress. Instead, fairness means ensuring that institutions are designed in such a way that they give everyone a fair chance to succeed and that any inequalities benefit those who are least advantaged. Public reasoning. Another element of Rawls' theory is the idea of the public reason, which holds the political decisions should be made based on the reasons that all citizens can reasonably accept regardless of their particular moral or religious beliefs. This ensures that the political process respects the diversity in the views in the pluralistic society and that political principles can be justified to all the citizens, not just to a particular group. Criticisms and responses. While Rawls' theory has had a huge impact, it has also faced significant criticism from the various political and the philosophical perspective. Libertarian criticism. Thinkers like Robert Nozick in his book Anarchy, State and Utopia argue that Rawls' focus on the redistribution and the difference principle is incompatible with the individual rights and the free market. Libertarians claim that any form of forced redistribution of wealth violates individual property rights and that justice should instead focus on respecting people's entitlement to what they acquire through their own efforts. Rawls' response. Rawls responds by emphasizing that the inequalities that results from the difference principles are acceptable only when they benefit the least advantaged and that system of free market exchange without regulation would likely result in the inequalities that harm the poorest member of the society. Rawls argues that this system of justice allows for the individual rights while also addressing the need for the fairness in the society. Communitarian criticism. Communitarian philosophers such as Michael Sandel and Alasdair MacHale argue that Rawls' framework is overly individualistic and ignores the importance of the community and the shared values. They argue that justice cannot be understood apart from the social context and the cultural practices that shape individual lives. Rawls responses. Rawls acknowledges the importance of the social context but insists that the principle of justice must be chosen in a way that respects individual rights and the liberties while also promoting the fairness. He contends that his theory can be adaptable to accommodate community-based values within the framework of justice as fairness. Feminist criticism. Some feminist theories argue that Rawls' theory does not adequately address the issues of the gender and family structure, which often leads to the significant inequalities in the distribution of the resources. Feminists contended that Rawls' focus on economic justice overlook the unpaid labor typically performed by the women in the household. Rawls' response: while Rawls' original theory does not explicitly address the gender issues, later revisions of his theory acknowledge that justice must also take into account the distribution of the responsibilities within the families and the household. He suggests that a more comprehensive view of the justice must include the provisions of the gender equity and the equal access to the family resources. Distributive justice in various legal systems. The idea of the fair distribution of the resources is generally traced back to the concept of the human rights, human dignity and the common good. It is grounded on the basis that civilization owes its individual member in equal proportion. Governments time to time formulate and alter the laws and regulations according to the situation affecting the distribution of the economic benefits and burdens in their societies. Almost all the changes from the standard tax and the industry laws to divorce laws have some distributive effect, and as a result different societies have different distributions. The Indian context has a strange drift from the western line of the thought. The average Indian is ignorant of his rights and does not really bother much with the social policies of justice. He is satisfied that if he sees justice being done in an acceptable manner of society, though tinged by the shades of the religion and divine intervention, this principle is sometimes criticized because it does not show any difference in productive contributions or distinguish between real needs and manifested needs. This is where reservations policies in India become extremely pertinent. India's policy on the reservation in an audacious attempt to heal the past injustice caused to the lower levels of the India's four-tier caste hierarchy. The Mandal report of 1980 suggested to reserve an additional 27% of the government position for the other backward classes for their fast upliftment. Amidst the violent protest, the Supreme Court validated this pain. The judgment, which originates from the public interest litigation, also strengthens the idea of distributive justice. Also, the Supreme Court's verdict on the various environment issues highlights its positive attitude to establish this concept firmly in India by application of polluter pays principle or the public trust doctrine. The case of Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, which attracted a homogeneous amount of attention on the concept of the procedure established by the law and due processes of law, has its source from the distributive justice only. After that case, there was a remarkable shift in the attitude of the judiciary. Even if there is some procedure that has been made established by some statutes or passed by the legislature, the justice will be done keeping in the mind the due process of law. Taking us away from the judgment of A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras, laws or regulations passed by the Supreme Court is binding on all the courts. But in some cases, it is seen that the Supreme Court, if needed, reverse its own decision. Thus, where the question of the public good comes and fairness is to be seen, or the need for the distribution of the right and responsibility comes, Supreme Court has always been in the favor of the public, or rather public good. Distributive justice refers to the ethical principles of fairness in the allocation of the resources, benefits and burdens with the society. In legal system, it addresses how wealth, rights, duties and other societal benefits should be distributed among the individuals and the group. Different legal systems shaped by the cultural, historical and philosophical background approach distributive justice in various ways. few major legal systems and their perspective on the distributive justice. Common law. Anglo-American system. The common law system primarily practiced in the United States, the United Kingdom and the other Commonwealth nations often approaches distributive justice through case law, statutory law and equity. In common law system, distributive justice is largely informed by the individual rights, legal precedents, stare decisis and the principle of the fairness. The system is designed to promote individual liberty, property rights and the freedom of contract. Redistribution common law system may incorporate redistributive policy through taxes and social welfare programs, but rely more on the market based solution than on the direct state intervention in the wealth distribution. Judicial role. Judges play a significant role in interpreting laws in the ways that uphold the individual rights and the fairness. Courts may consider equitable relief when the legal remedies fails to achieve just outcomes. Challenges. Critics argue that the common law system can perpetuate inequality, particularly in the case of wealth distribution, where market-driven policies may exaggerate income disparities. Civil law. Court-based systems. Civil law system most commonly found in Europe, Latin America and the parts of the Asia rely on the codified statutes and the legal framework to define the rights and the duties. Key concepts. In the civil law, distributive justice is grounded in the written constitution or comprehensive codes such as Napoleon Code or the German Civil Code. The law aims for a more explicit and systematic distribution of wealth and resources through the application of the codified principles. Redistributions. Civil law countries tend to have more direct state involvement in wealth distribution. They often implement progressive taxation system, social security benefit and other mechanisms to reduce economic disparities. Judicial role. Judges in the civil law systems are typically less autonomous in interpreting the laws and more focused on applying the legal code strictly. However, they can interpret laws to achieve the just outcomes within the framework of the courts. Challenges. Critics often pointed out to the bureaucratic rigidity in the civil law system and argue that it can sometimes limit flexibility in achieving the justice for the individual in unequal or complex situations. Islamic law, Sharia. Islamic law or Sharia is based on the religious principle found in the Quran, Hadith, the saying of the Prophet Muhammad and interpretation by the Islamic scholars. Distributive justice in the Islamic law emphasizes fairness, equality and the prevention of exploitation. Islamic principles such as zakat, almsgiving and sadaq, voluntary charity, are the foundational to the Islamic approach to the wealth distribution. Redistribution. Sharia emphasizes social welfare and equitable redistribution of the resources. Wealth redistribution is encouraged through the voluntary and obligatory acts such as zakat, which mandates Muslims to give a portion of their wealth, usually 2.5%, to help the poor and the needy. Inheritance law in the Islamic law also emphasizes fairness and protect the rights for all the heirs, particularly women. Judicial role. Judges in the Islamic law systems, particularly in the countries where Sharia plays a central role, may issue bring based upon the religious taxes and the interpretations. The focus is often on achieving the social equity and preventing economic injustice through the ethical guidelines. Challenges. Critics argue that gender inequalities, inheritance and economic restrictions may sometimes undermine the distributive justice principles in Islamic law, especially in the modern context. Socialistic legal systems such as those that were historically found in the Soviet Union and some contemporary Marxist-Leninist states are characterized by the belief that distributive justice is achieved through the state control of the country and equality of the outcome. The central tenet of the distributive justice in a socialist system is that economic and social equality should be pursued through the collective ownership of the resources and the state planning. Distributive justice is linked to the goal of eliminating class distinction and achieving a classless society. Redistribution. Socialistic legal system emphasized the redistribution on a large scales, often through the states run social programs, centralize the economies and the free access to the basic needs such as healthcare, education and housing. So, judicial role. In socialistic system, the role of judges is often subordinate to the political leadership and the legal decisions may be influenced by the state ideologies. The focus is on ensuring the distribution of the resources align with the socialist principles. Challenges. While socialist systems aims for the equality, critics argue that bureaucratic inefficiency and the lack of the market incentive often lead to economic stagnation and, in some cases, authoritarian governance and undermine the justice. Customary law. Customary law systems which are often practiced in many indigenous community, African nations and the parts of the Asia are based on the traditions, customs and the community practices that have been passed down through the generations. Distributive justice in a customary law emphasize communal living, reciprocity and the protection of the community welfare. Resources are often shared or distributed based on the communal norms rather than the strict legal codes. Redistribution. Customary law system often incorporates the principle of social equity and the redistribution through informal means. Wealth, land and the resources may be distributed based on the need, seniority or participation in community rituals. Judicial role. Dispute resolution in the customary system typically involves the elders or the community leaders who are mediate and adjudicate dispute based on the local customs and the norms. So, challenges. While customary systems often promote social harmony, they can sometimes be at the odds with the modern legal principles, particularly in issues of the gender equality, individual rights and the economic development. In concluding remarks, the recent years have witnessed a remarkable growth in the emphasis and attention paid to the distributive effects of economic development policies. All these three principles of equity, equality and the social need, which are most relevant in the context of the distributive justice, are duly followed in many fields, especially in the legal field. These principles appeals to the notion that fair treatment is a matter of the giving people what they deserve, regardless of the same outcome. It is much more useful if implemented on the long-term basis. Human behavior is the first target of the moral assessment and rightness. The external facts and the institutions are secondary. Through essential be it poverty, education, development, peace talks, every important aspect in today's world can be seen in the light of distributive justice. The need of today is to take significant steps to help the rise and flourish our society and make it a better place to live. Satyamev Jayate. This one phrase highlights the essence of the vision and the ideals of the judicial system in the India. Therefore, we must have the equality of the treatment and the opportunity in India. We should not get deviated by the declaration that there may not be equality of the result. Distributive justice, through central to all the legal system, take various forms depending on the underlying philosophical, cultural and political context. While some systems emphasize individual rights and the market-based solutions, common law, others focus on the social equalities through the state intervention, civil law and socialist law. In the system like Islamic law and the customary law, justice is intervened with the religious principles and the community norms. Regardless of the system, the goal of the distributive justice is to ensure fairness, reduce inequality and promote societal well-being through the methods of the outcome can vary greatly. Thank you for joining the session. I hope this discussion have provided a valuable insight into the concept of the distributive justice. I encourage you all for further explore and critically engage with these ideas to contribute towards a more equitable society. Thank you so much.